I never meant to check the hidden compartment. I just wanted to sell the car. The payments were piling up again, and the bank had started calling every day. That morning, with the sky in Brooklyn covered in a hazy gray and the air thick with that lingering dampness after rain, I stood in front of Nathan's old sedan and told myself, it's just a car. But the moment I reached for the handle, my hand trembled. It had been 35 days since he died. 35 days since the hospital called with words like heart attack and nothing we could do. 35 days of Sophie barely speaking unless it was about school or dinner. Even those words felt like fragments from another life that no longer fit. That morning, I found myself alone in the kitchen, stirring cold coffee with a spoon too loudly. The clink against ceramic used to annoy Nathan. Now it filled the silence. Like a ghost of our old arguments, the family photo still sat by the window. Nathan smiling with his arms around me and Sophie, taken last summer in the Hamptons. We looked happy, real, and I wondered exactly when the illusion had begun. Breakfast is ready. I called up the stairs. I knew Sophie wouldn't answer. Her bedroom door slammed shut minutes earlier. The sound sharp and final. 16 is hard. Grieving at 16 is brutal. But watching your daughter become a stranger is something else entirely. The car sat at the far end of the driveway, speckled with pollen and streaks of grime like it hadn't been touched since the funeral. Nathan used to wash it every Saturday, polishing the hood until it gleamed. He believed a car said everything about a man. I didn't care about that. I just wanted to pay the electric bill. I took the spare keys from the kitchen drawer and walked out. It had started to drizzle again. That misty New York rain that doesn't soak you but somehow finds its way under your skin. I climbed into the driver's seat and closed the door. The air inside was stale but unmistakably a mix of sandalwood cologne, leather, and something else I couldn't name but felt like memory. I reached toward the glove compartment, hesitating, only for a second. The click sounded louder than I expected. Inside were the usual things: insurance papers, an old phone charger, sunglasses. I picked them out one by one, placing them neatly on the passenger seat. Nothing unusual, but something felt off. The compartment seemed shallower than it should be. I ran my fingers along the back wall and felt a slight ridge. When I pressed it, there was a soft click and a false panel popped open. A hidden compartment. Inside was a small black USB drive and a key. Both plain, unremarkable. But something in me shifted when I saw them. I felt it in my gut. This wasn't just a car anymore. It was the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. I held the items in my palm as rain tapped on the windshield. Suddenly, I was no longer a widow cleaning out a car. I was a woman standing at the edge of a truth I never saw coming, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know what it was. You know that moment when your whole world is about to change? When you can still walk away, put everything back, and pretend you never found anything? I had that moment, sitting in Nathan's car, staring at that USB drive. But something pushed me forward, maybe grief, maybe curiosity, maybe a need to know if the man I mourned was really the man I married. I didn't plug it in right away. I just stood in the kitchen staring at the USB drive and key like they might explode if I touched them wrong. The key was ordinary, probably for a storage unit or lockbox. But it was the USB that drew my attention, its small red light blinking like a warning. I carried them upstairs to the office, Nathan's office, though I'd avoided calling it that since he died. The room still smelled like him. Books on immigration, law lined the shelves. A framed certificate from a refugee assistance program hung above the desk. That had always been his passion, helping displaced people find legal footing. He never talked about the details, just said, "I'm making a difference," and changed the subject. The screen lit up as I opened the laptop. My hands hovered over the keyboard. For a second, I imagined putting everything away, pretending I never found anything. But the moment had passed. The USB slid into the port with a click too loud in the quiet house. A folder appeared. No name, just a plain yellow icon. I opened it. Inside were dozens of files, letters, photos, PDFs labeled with codes and numbers I didn't recognize. I clicked on the first document, and the words blinked into view. Dear Nathan, thank you again for agreeing to help. I honestly don't know what I would have done without you. Valeria, I froze. Valeria? That name didn't belong in my life. It didn't belong in Nathan's either, or at least not the part of him I'd known. My stomach tightened as I opened another file. I'm so scared. Lucas's fever hasn't gone down for days. I know I said I wouldn't ask again, but if you can help with the clinic bills, another Lucas asked about you again. He keeps saying he wants to fly kites like last time. He misses you. And I do too. My mouth went dry. The cursor blinked at me like it was daring me to keep going. Photos came next. A woman with warm brown eyes and tired cheeks. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, with curly hair and a bright smile. In some pictures, they stood alone. In others, Nathan was with them, arms wrapped around them, laughing, smiling the way he used to smile with us. I backed away from the desk like it might burn me. My knees nearly gave out as I clutched the edge of the chair, breathing hard. Who was Valeria? Who was Lucas? Who had Nathan been? Really? I didn't hear the door open until it was too late. What are you doing? Sophie's voice cut through the fog. Like a shard of glass, she stood in the doorway, headphones around her neck, eyes puffy like she hadn't slept. Her gaze moved from the screen to the USB, then back to me. Are you spying on Dad? Her voice cracked. Sophie, no, you're going through his stuff like he was some criminal. She stepped forward. He's dead, Mom. Can't you just let him be? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The weight of it all sat like stone on my chest. She turned on her heel. You're unbelievable. The door slammed behind her, and I was left staring at the screen at a version of my husband I didn't recognize. A version that now lived in my daughter's anger and a stranger's eyes. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the rain whispering against the windows. My mind ran in circles, names, dates, letters, the image of Nathan's arms around that boy, the way he looked at him, the way he used to look at Sophie. At dawn, I got up, made coffee, and returned to the office. I opened the folder again, slower this time, letting the reality settle. The files weren't random. The letters from Valeria stretched across years, some tender, others practical. But one thing remained consistent. Lucas. His name appeared in every message. I searched Nathan's email accounts next. Most were locked, but one remained open. The inbox was empty, cleaned out. The USB must have been where he stored everything. Personal, everything separate. I checked our financial statements I'd been avoiding for weeks, not looking for numbers but patterns. There they were. Transfers on the 1st and 15th of each month. Small amounts, just enough to avoid raising suspicion. But over time, they added up to thousands, all to the same account. The name listed wasn't Valeria, just initials, VM. But I didn't need more. I copied the account number and turned to the scanned documents from the USB. One PDF contained a rental agreement, a lease signed for years ago. The address jumped off the page. Queens, Astoria, a neighborhood I rarely visited. The last time I'd been to that part of the city, Sophie still wore braces. We'd gone to a Greek festival, and Nathan insisted on taking the scenic route home. Now I realized he probably hadn't been avoiding traffic at all. The key. I suddenly remembered the small key I'd found alongside the USB. I examined it closely and noticed a storage company logo engraved on it. The number 347 was stamped below. I didn't tell Sophie I was leaving. She hadn't spoken to me since the night before. I left a note on the counter and took the keys to my Subaru. The streets were slick from the rain, the clouds heavy with more. New York always looked harsher in the morning mist. All sharp angles and steel softened only slightly by the weather. It took me 40 minutes to reach the storage facility, a nondescript building wedged between a laundromat and a discount furniture store. Inside smelled of dust and concrete. Can I help you? The attendant barely looked up from his phone. Unit 347, I said, showing the key. My husband. ID? He interrupted. I handed him my driver's license. He glanced at it, then at a computer screen. Nathan Green? Yeah. You're on the access list. Sign here. I followed him through a maze of corridors until we reached a small unit. He left me there alone with the key trembling in my hand. When I opened the rolling door, I wasn't prepared for what I found. Not stacks of secret documents or hidden cash, but a life. A small, carefully curated space that told the story of a child growing up. Shelves lined one wall, filled with school projects labeled with Lucas's name. A science fair trophy, a collection of model airplanes, photos in cheap frames showing the boy at different ages from toddler to his current self. In many, Nathan stood beside him. In some, they were at museums, parks, baseball games. In the corner sat a twin bed with a blue space-themed comforter. Above it, glow-in-the-dark stars formed constellations on the ceiling. It wasn't just a storage unit. It was a bedroom, A place where Nathan could be a father to Lucas, away from our home, away from me and Sophie. My legs gave out, and I sat heavily on the bed. On the nightstand was a framed drawing clearly done by a younger Lucas of 3 stick figures. One tall man labeled Dad, one woman labeled Mom, and a small boy. They were holding hands under a crayon sun. I sat there for a long time, heart pounding against my ribs, fingers clenched around the bedspread like it was the only thing holding me together. When I finally left, I didn't drive to the address in Astoria. I couldn't face them yet. Instead, I went home, each mile feeling longer than the last. The house felt colder than I remembered when I returned. Sophie wasn't in the kitchen. Her plate still sat in the sink from breakfast. The note I'd left remained untouched. Her door was closed. I didn't knock. I didn't have the energy to fight again. Instead, I made tea and stared out the window. The tree in our backyard had started to change, its leaves tinged with gold and red. I almost didn't notice the silence breaking. Behind me, I looked at everything. Sophie's voice was soft but sharp. I turned and saw her standing by the staircase, holding the USB drive in her hand. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes swollen. You found it in Dad's car, didn't you? The pictures? The letters? All of it. I nodded. I didn't go looking, Sophie. I just wanted to clean it out before selling it. Is it true? Her voice cracked. Did he have another family? My throat tightened. I don't know if it was a family, Sophie. I found a storage unit too. He kept a room there for the boy. She shook her head slowly. Don't lie to me. Not now. I'm not lying, I whispered. I wish I was. You always thought he was too good to be true, she said, tears forming. You were always looking for something wrong. And now that he's gone, you're digging through his secrets like it proves you were right all along. That's not fair, I said, my voice breaking. I didn't want any of this. But you kept looking, she accused. You didn't stop. No, I admitted quietly. I didn't. She swallowed hard, tears streaming down her face. I hate this. I hate that he's not here to explain. I hate that I don't know who he was. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And I hate you for showing me. The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I'm going to Aunt Rachel's, she said, turning away. Sophie, please, but she disappeared up the stairs. I heard drawers opening, bags being filled. 10 minutes later, the front door slammed shut. I didn't chase after her. I just stood there, holding a mug of tea gone cold, wondering how many pieces a heart could break in two before it stopped trying to hold anything at all. The next morning, I found myself back in Nathan's office, surrounded by the life he left behind. His desk was still meticulously organized, like he'd only stepped away for a moment. The silence in the room felt heavier than anywhere else in the house. I sat in his chair, unsure what I was looking for. Some kind of clarity, maybe, or just one more piece of the puzzle. Then I remembered something in one of Valeria's emails. I've kept all the papers you asked for in the place we discussed. The key is where you showed me. I looked around the office with new eyes. Where would Nathan hide another key? It took me an hour of searching behind books, under the desk, in every drawer. Finally, I found it taped to the bottom of his desk lamp. A small silver key, different from the storage unit one. It didn't match any lock in our house. But there was one place I hadn't checked yet. I drove to the bank where we kept our safety deposit box. After verifying my identity, the manager led me to a private room. Our family box sat where it always had, containing birth certificates, passports, our wills, but the key I found didn't fit that box. It was for a different one I never knew existed. The manager checked the records. Box 2-7, he said. Mr. Green opened it 6 years ago. 6 years. Right around the time Sophie started middle school. Right around the time Nathan began working late more often. When the manager brought box 227 and left me alone, I sat staring at it for several minutes before working up the courage to open it. Inside was a thick folder, a sealed envelope with my name on it, and a small velvet pouch. I opened the envelope first. Nathan's handwriting filled the page, firm, slanted, familiar. Olivia, if you're reading this, it means something's happened. Maybe I'm gone. Maybe you found the drive or the storage unit. Maybe you already know more than I ever managed to say. I don't know how much time I have left to explain, but I owe you the truth. All of it. I made mistakes. Terrible ones. Valeria and I met during a pro bono clinic for undocumented immigrants. She was scared, alone, pregnant, and trying to build a life for her baby after fleeing an abusive relationship in Colombia. I helped with her asylum case during that time when our marriage was going through its rough patch, when we barely spoke for months after the miscarriage. I crossed a line. It wasn't a long affair, just one night when I was feeling worthless. And she made me feel needed. One night that changed everything. I thought I could walk away, that I could forget. Then she told me about the baby. I wasn't sure at first if Lucas was mine, but the moment I saw him, I knew. He has my mother's eyes, Olivia. My mother's exact eyes. I didn't tell you because I was terrified of losing you and Sophie. I told myself I was protecting our family, but really, I was protecting myself from facing what I'd done. 3 years ago, Valeria came back into my life. Lucas was sick, and they were facing deportation. I couldn't ignore them. I couldn't let my son suffer. So I helped with papers, medical bills, and yes, money. I set up the room in the storage unit so I could spend time with him without disrupting our lives. It was wrong to compartmentalize like that, to be two different fathers to two different children, to lie to you every day. I know this is too much to ask, but if you can find a way forward, please look after Lucas. Not Valeria, she's strong and proud and would never accept direct help from you. But Lucas is just a boy. He didn't ask for any of this. And protect Sophie. If anything I've done hurts her, shield her, whatever it takes. The pouch contains my mother's ring. I always plan to give it to Sophie one day. Please make sure she gets it, and tell her that despite my failures, my love for her was never a lie. Everything else, documents, names, accounts, is in the folder. I trust you to do what's right, even if I didn't deserve that trust. Always yours, Nathan. When I finished reading, I didn't cry. I just sat there, the letter shaking in my hands, feeling like every piece of my world had shifted slightly. And yet somehow, for the first time in weeks, I understood. I opened the velvet pouch. Inside was a vintage emerald ring, Nathan's mother's engagement ring. She had died when he was in college, long before I met him. He rarely spoke of her, but when he did, his voice always softened. It should have gone to Sophie on her 21st birthday. According to family tradition, I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car outside the bank for a long time, watching the city pass me by. Nearby, a construction crew jackhammered concrete. A woman with grocery bags hurried past, dodging puddles. Life moved forward, oblivious and unchanged, but I had just read a letter that split mine in two. That evening, I opened the folder Nathan had left behind. Names, contact information, medical records. One document detailed his petition to help Valeria gain legal residency. Another, a birth certificate with Lucas's name, listing Nathan as the father. I stared at the DNA test results confirming paternity. 99.9% match. I thought about that little boy, Lucas, and his mother, who now carried the burden of a life built on silence. What had Nathan been to them? Savior? Secret? Ghost? The next morning, I drove to Astoria. I didn't call ahead. I didn't warn her. I parked across the street from the address on the lease and waited. I saw them before they saw me, a woman with long dark hair stepping out of an apartment building, grocery bags in hand. Behind her, a boy with a backpack, bouncing down the steps, talking excitedly. She laughed at something he said. I didn't need confirmation. It was them. She was Valeria. And that boy was Lucas. Even from a distance, I could see it in his face, the shape of his eyes, the way his mouth turned up when he smiled. He looked just like Nathan. I should have gotten out of the car. I should have walked up and said something, anything, but I didn't. I just sat there, heart pounding, fingers clenched around the steering wheel. Across the street, Valeria adjusted her jacket and nudged Lucas forward. He bounced ahead, waving at someone near the corner. They disappeared around it, and I stayed frozen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt this quiet kind of collapse, like something inside me had silently caved in without making a sound. When I finally returned home, the house felt emptier than ever. Sophie still wasn't back from Rachel's, according to my sister-in-law's texts. She needed space to process. I made dinner for 1 and ate standing at the kitchen counter, not bothering with a plate. As I stared out the window at the darkening sky, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. She's read his letter. I gave her the space she needed. She's ready to talk. 20 minutes later, Sophie walked through the front door. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. She looked older somehow, like grief had aged her overnight. She didn't speak at first. She just walked to the kitchen table and sat down, placing Nathan's letter between us. Did you go see them? She finally asked. Yes, I admitted. I didn't talk to them. I just needed to see. And they're real, I said quietly. The boy Lucas, he looks like him. Sophie's jaw tightened. He gave the boy grandma's middle name. I hadn't noticed that. Lucas. Luke. The same as Nathan's mother's maiden name, Lucas. I found something else, I said, placing the velvet pouch on the table. It was in a safety deposit box with the letter. It's for you. Sophie stared at it without touching it. I don't want anything from him. It's your grandmother's ring. He always meant for you to have it. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. How could he do this? How could he look me in the face every day and lie? I reached across the table, not quite touching her. I don't know, Sophie. I wish I did. She shook her head slowly. I feel like my whole life was fake. Like every memory is contaminated now. Not everything was a lie, I said softly. The love he had for you, that was real. How do you know? She challenged. Because I saw how he looked at you. How he talked about you. How proud he was. I swallowed hard. A man can be two things at once, Sophie. He can make terrible mistakes and still love his daughter with his whole heart. She didn't respond, but she took the pouch, sliding it into her pocket without opening it. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of Nathan's deception hanging between us. Finally, Sophie spoke. What are you going to do about them? It was the question I'd been asking myself since finding the USB. What was my responsibility to this woman and her son, to Nathan's son? I don't know yet, I answered honestly, but I can't pretend they don't exist. I don't want to meet them, Sophie said firmly. You don't have to, I assured her. Not now, maybe not ever, but I need to talk to her at least once. Sophie nodded stiffly and stood. I'm going to bed. As she headed for the stairs, she paused. Mom? Yes? I don't hate you. I don't know how to feel anything right now. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. I know, sweetheart. Me too. 3 days later, I returned to Astoria. This time, I didn't sit in the car watching. I walked directly to the apartment building and found Unit 3B on the directory. Valeria Morales. I stood outside her door for nearly a minute before finding the courage to knock. The door opened, and there she was, the woman from the photos. Shorter than I expected, with tired eyes but a certain grace in how she carried herself. Her eyes widened when she saw me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. You're Olivia, she finally said softly. I nodded. Yes. She glanced behind me as if expecting someone else, perhaps Sophie. Is everything okay? The question was so ordinary, so normal, as if we were acquaintances running into each other at a store. No, I said honestly. Nothing is okay. Nathan is dead, and I found out about you and Lucas. She paled but stepped back. Would you like to come in? Lucas is at school. Her apartment was small but immaculate, books stacked neatly on shelves, family photos in simple frames, the scent of coffee lingering in the air. I sat on the edge of the couch while she poured the cups without asking. I don't know what to say, she began, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. I never wanted to hurt anyone, but you did, I replied, not unkindly. You both did. She nodded, accepting this. I loved him, she said quietly. Not the way you did, not with the house and the wedding and the life you built. But he saved us. I let the words hang in the air. I could have argued, could have corrected her, but what would have been the point? Lucas thinks his father worked too much to visit often, but that he cared, she continued. I never told him the whole truth. I nodded. Nathan left a letter and provisions for Lucas. Her back stiffened. We don't need charity. It's not charity, I said. It's his responsibility. And now, it's mine. Why would you help us? She asked, genuinely confused. You should hate us. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a homewrecker or a villain, but a woman who had made difficult choices to protect her child. A woman who, like me, had loved an imperfect man. Because Lucas is innocent in all of this, I said finally. And because holding on to anger won't bring Nathan back or make any of this easier. She studied me for a long moment. You're not what I expected. Neither are you, I admitted. Before I left, she handed me a small photo. This is from Lucas's last birthday. Nathan brought the cake. I stared at it. Nathan kneeling beside a beaming Lucas, 8 candles glowing on a superhero cake. They had the same smile. Thank you, I said, tucking it into my purse. The door. She hesitated. What happens now? It was the question I'd been asking myself for days. We figure it out, I said simply, slowly, carefully. For the children. You don't have to do this. She whispered. No, I replied, tears finally coming. But someone does. And for the first time since Nathan died, I didn't feel like I was breaking apart. I felt like I was beginning again, not from scratch, but from truth. Sophie returned to school the following week. Her counselor said staying busy would help. I wasn't so sure, but I didn't argue. At night, I'd hear her pacing in her room, the floorboards creaking above my head. One evening, as I was cooking dinner, she came into the kitchen and leaned against the counter. I've been thinking, she said, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve, about what Dad wrote in his letter. I turned down the heat under the pasta sauce. What part? The part about Lucas not asking for any of this. She looked up, her eyes clear for the first time in weeks. He's right. That kid didn't do anything wrong. I nodded, waiting. I'm not saying I forgive Dad, she continued carefully. And I'm definitely not ready to play happy families. But maybe the boy deserves to know something about his father. The good parts at least. I reached for her hand, and to my surprise, she didn't pull away. That's very mature of you, Sophie, she shrugged. I found a picture of him in Dad's things. Lucas. He was holding a science fair trophy. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Dad used to help me with science projects too. That night, I wrote a letter of my own, not to Nathan, but to Lucas. Dear Lucas, you don't know me, not really. Maybe your mother has mentioned my name, maybe not. That's okay. I'm writing because sometimes the adults around you make choices that leave children holding questions they never asked for. My name is Olivia. I was married to your father, Nathan. I don't know what you've been told about why he couldn't always be there. Maybe you think he was just a busy man who cared about you from a distance. Or maybe you felt his absence more deeply. The truth is complicated. He loved you quietly, in the only way he thought he could. That wasn't enough. It wasn't fair to you. And it wasn't fair to my daughter, Sophie, either. But here's what you need to know. Your existence is not a mistake. You are not someone's secret or a problem to be solved. You are a boy with your father's eyes and your mother's strength. A boy who wins science fair trophies and loves superhero cakes. I won't pretend this is easy for any of us. My heart is still heavy with grief and betrayal. Sophie is still trying to understand why the father she adored had a whole other life she never knew about. But despite all that, I want you to know something simple and true. You are not to blame. You are loved. You deserve every good thing. One day, if you ever want to know more about your father or have questions only I might be able to answer, I'll be here. Not as a replacement for anything, but maybe as a bridge to understanding. Until then, be kind to your mother. She's braver than most. And be kind to yourself, especially on the days when the world feels confusing. With warmth, Olivia. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope but didn't mail it. Not yet. Some truths need time. Autumn came slowly that year. The kind of fall where mornings held a gentle chill and the trees seemed reluctant to let go of their leaves. I started cooking again, filling the house with the scents of cinnamon and rosemary and something almost like peace. Sophie spent most of her days at school or with friends, but now and then she'd drift into the kitchen and sit across from me. Sometimes we talked about Nathan, sometimes we didn't, but the silence between us had softened. One evening, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, my letter to Lucas in her hands. I found this in your desk drawer, she said. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for stamps. I set down my grocery bags. And it's good, she said simply. You should send it. 2 days later, I mailed the letter to Valeria's apartment with a note asking her to share it with Lucas when she felt the time was right. A week passed with no response. Then, as I was leaving for work one morning, I found a small envelope in our mailbox. Inside was a drawing, a colorful sketch of planets and stars, clearly done by a child. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, "Thank you for your letter. From Lucas." I showed it to Sophie that evening. She studied it for a long time, tracing the wobbly lines of the planets with her fingertip. He likes space stuff, she said quietly. Dad would have loved that. And for the first time since Nathan's death, she said his name without her voice breaking. We didn't try to force anything. There were no scheduled meetings, no awkward family dinners. Just space to feel what we felt without apology. Space to grieve and grow and shift. The kind of space that slowly, gently allowed something else to take root. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. Then one cold Sunday morning, as I was making pancakes, Sophie asked, "Do you think he'd like to come over sometime?" Lucas. I could show him my telescope. My hand paused mid-flip. "Are you sure?" She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "He's my half-brother, right?" "That's what he is, technically. And he likes space stuff." I smiled softly. "I can ask Valeria." She nodded and took a bite of pancake. "Whatever. It was just an idea." But we both knew it was more than that. The first time Lucas came over, he wore a red hoodie a size too big and clutched a book about astronomy to his chest like a shield. Valeria stood behind him on the porch, giving me that nervous, polite smile of a mother trying not to overstep. Sophie was the one who opened the door. They stared at each other for a moment, two kids with nothing in common but everything tangled between them. "Hey," Sophie said, her voice carefully casual. "Hi," Lucas replied, gripping the book tighter. There was a silence thick enough to stop time. Then, to my quiet surprise, Sophie stepped aside. "You coming in or what?" "I want to show you my telescope before it gets dark." And just like that, he did. Dinner was awkward. We kept it simple: pizza and salad, something easy. Valeria and I sat at one end of the table, letting the kids find their own rhythm. Lucas barely touched his food. Sophie kept sneaking glances at him like she was studying a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. But when he mentioned that he was building a model of the Mars rover for school, her eyes lit up. "I did that last year," she said. "The wheels are the hardest part." "Yeah." His voice cracked with excitement. "I keep messing them up. I still have mine. I could show you how I did it." It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. After dinner, the kids went to Sophie's room to look at her space models. I heard them talking tentatively at first, then with bursts of laughter that caught me off guard. Valeria helped me clear the table, both of us moving in a careful dance of politeness. "Your daughter is kind," she said softly. "So is your son." I replied. We didn't need to say more. There was a fragile peace between us now, not the kind that erased the past, but the kind that acknowledged it and chose to move forward anyway. Before they left, Lucas turned to me with serious eyes. "Can I come back sometime?" Sophie said she'd help me with my science project. I felt something warm unfold in my chest. "Of course." Valeria squeezed my hand before stepping out into the night. I watched them go, a little boy and his mother walking back into the world, but not into silence this time, not into shame. Later, as I was turning off the lights, Sophie came to stand beside me at the front window. "He's okay," she said simply. I nodded. "He is." She leaned against my side, and we stood there like that for a while, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. No grand ending. No sweeping music. Just a porch light left on, 2 pizza boxes in the recycling, and a home that had stretched wide enough to hold more than one truth, more than one kind of love. Because sometimes healing doesn't mean going back. It means building something entirely new and daring to let others in. Weeks passed, then months, and gradually what began as cautious visits became something quieter, more natural. Lucas started coming over on Sundays, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to sit at the kitchen table while Sophie helped him with homework. He brought stories from school, science facts he'd memorized, and once, a wilted plant he'd tried to grow on his windowsill. It had barely survived, but he was proud of it anyway. "Next time I'll try herbs," he said. "I'll help you," Sophie offered. They didn't talk much about Nathan, not directly, but his absence was there in the room with us like a shadow that no longer frightened anyone, only reminded us of where the light used to fall. Valeria came sometimes too. At first, she stayed close to the door, always a little unsure, always ready to retreat. But then one afternoon, she brought homemade empanadas and photos of Lucas as a baby. "He used to sleep on my chest," she said, smiling at the photo. "He'd curl up like a little bean." I listened quietly because the truth was, I never got to see Nathan hold Lucas. I never saw him be that father, but I could imagine it now, not to excuse the lies, but to accept the fullness of the man I had loved. The flawed, divided man who had tried in all the wrong ways to do right by everyone. That spring, Sophie invited Lucas to work with her on a project for the city science fair. They built a model of exoplanet orbiting distant stars, complete with a presentation about how astronomers detect them. When they demonstrated it beneath the high school auditorium lights, I stood beside Valeria in the back row. As we watched, Our children explain gravitational microlensing to the judges. Her hand accidentally brushed against mine. We didn't pull away. Afterward, Lucas came bounding down the aisle with a blue ribbon. First place. Sophie followed behind, cheeks flushed with pride. We killed it, she said, bumping her shoulder against his. He grinned at her, and I swear it was the first time I saw something new in him, not just a resemblance to Nathan, but a light all his own. That night, Sophie came into my room and sat on the edge of the bed, legs swinging. I'm still mad at Dad sometimes, she said. That's okay, I replied. You're allowed to be, but I'm glad Lucas exists. She looked up at me, her eyes clear. Is that weird? My throat tightened. No, it's beautiful. And in that moment, I realized something simple and powerful. We don't always get to choose how the story begins, but we can shape how it continues. We can choose grace. We can choose openness. We can choose family, even the kind born from fracture. A few weeks later, I was cleaning out the last of Nathan's things when I found a small notebook tucked inside an old jacket pocket. Inside were sketches, rough drawings of landscape designs. Nathan had always talked about wanting to build a garden someday. On the final page was a quote, written in his precise handwriting. The wound is the place where the light enters you. I ran my finger over the words, feeling the impression they left on the paper. He had been wounded too by his own choices, by his divided heart. But perhaps, in our stumbling way toward healing, we had all found a little light. That summer, we planted a garden in the backyard. Sophie, Lucas, Valeria, and me. We dug our hands into the soil, planted seeds for vegetables and flowers, and built something new from the earth. It wasn't perfect. There were still days when grief ambushed me. In quiet moments. Days when Sophie retreated into silence. Days when the weight of all that had happened felt too heavy to bear. But there were other days too, days when Lucas's laughter filled our kitchen, when Sophie taught him to use her telescope, when Valeria and I sat on the porch sharing stories. That had nothing to do with Nathan and everything to do with the people we were becoming. One evening, as the sun set over our imperfect garden, I watched Sophie and Lucas chasing fireflies across the lawn. Their shadows stretched long behind them, merging and separating in the fading light. He would be proud, Valeria said quietly, joining me on the steps. Of all of this, I wasn't sure if that was true. But I was proud of Sophie's resilience, of Lucas's gentle heart, of the family we were building from the ruins of secrets to long kept. Thank you, I said simply. She looked at me surprised. For what? For letting us in. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Thank you for making room. The kids ran back to us, breathless and laughing, their hands cupped around flickering lights. Look, Lucas said, opening his palms to reveal a single firefly. For a moment, we all watched it glow bright, then dim, then bright again before it took flight, rising above us into the deepening blue of evening. Not an ending, but a continuation. Not forgiveness exactly, but something like grace, and in the gentle darkness that followed, we found our way back inside together.